Chapter 33. The Dark Waits. Rand lay in the straw bed of the farmer's cart, then pulled himself up to look over the side. He found it easier than an hour ago, and his head was clearer. He saw they were entering a village of red-bricked homes. The further they travelled, the closer the towns and villages became. Some of the villagers called a greeting to the farmer, Hyam Kinch, who shouted back a few words to each around his pipe. None of them paid any mind to his passengers, to Rand's relief. The atmosphere was jovial, with people stopping to chat happily. Reaching the other side of the village, they got back onto the road, and Rand lay back in the straw when a wagon came toward the village. They were always wary of them. Matt had kept down in the straw the whole time, his scarf wrapped around his eyes. Matt asked him to describe what he saw, and Rand told him nothing much. He asked Matt how his eyes were now. Do they still hurt? Matt told him they were getting better, and only hurt if he looks at the sun. He then asked Rand if he was feeling better now. Rand told him a little, and thought on how his illness had come on so fast and recovered just as quickly. A group of mounted soldiers began to pass, and Rand made sure his sword was hidden. They nodded to Kinch and barely registered the boys. They wore the fanciest armour he'd ever seen, shining like silver, with red and white undercoats, collars and cloaks. They even had red pennants on their lances, and by the time they were gone he'd counted 32 of them. Matt asked who they were, and Kinch told them they were Queen's Guards. They patrol all the way to Green Spring, which isn't as far as they used to. There are parts of Andor that haven't seen them in over a year. They keep the Queen's peace, uphold her laws, and take lawbreakers to the magistrates. Kinch remarked that they must be from a ways off not to know about them. Absently, Rand said the Two Rivers, and instantly regretted it. Kinch told him that the Two Rivers is almost at the border of Andor, and things must be bad if the people haven't seen the guards to recognise them. Rand wondered if the mayor even knew they were a part of Andor, and had a queen. He'd never heard it mentioned. Kinch announced it was the end of his journey, and told them that Camelin is only 2 days away. The boys jumped down with their gear. Rand's legs wobbled as he guided Matt down. Kinch announced that they could rest for a few days at his farm. He and his wife had already had most illnesses, so he's not worried about catching whatever is wrong with them. Matt looked at him suspiciously, but Rand tried to remind himself that not everyone was after them. Rand politely declined the offer, and Kinch told him they can reach the next village, Carrisford, by nightfall. Kinch looked thoughtful as he told them he originally thought they were runaway apprentices, but now worries it's something more serious. But whatever it is, he doubts they're dark friends. If they change their minds, his farm is 5 miles away, and he pointed in the direction. Matt demanded what does he know about dark friends and what they would look like. Kinch's face tightened as he told them to suit themselves and rode off to his farm. Matt turned to Rand and said, "I'm sorry, you need a place to rest. Maybe we can go after him. I just can't get over this feeling that everyone's after us. Light. I wish I knew why they were. I wish it was over." Rand told him that there are still good people, but they can't afford to stop. He doubts there's anywhere they could hide. Matt nodded, and Rand thought back to their flight from the Four Kings. The rain had beat down on them as they staggered down the road. Matt barely able to see. Lightning split the sky, making Matt flinch at the light, and soon they were soaked through. Matt had begged him not to abandon him, and Rand assured him he wouldn't leave him for anything. He told Matt that Gode must be dead, and his men are for sure. They found some bushes to huddle under, trying to use their cloaks as a tent against the rain. Rand knew straight away that he was in a dream. As he walked through the Four Kings, it was devoid of life, but he knew someone waited for him. He reached the dancing cartman and found Gode sat alone at a table. His skin was red and blistered, his face almost skull-like, with shriveled lips baring his teeth, hair burnt and lidless eyes. Rand declared that he was dead, and from behind Baalzamon told him, "Yes, but he did find you for me, so deserves a reward, don't you think?" Rand whirled around, finding the Dark One in his blood-red clothing, with a triumphant look on his face, but also rage and hate. "You see, youngling, you cannot hide from me forever. One way or another I will find you. What protects you makes you vulnerable. One time you hide, then you light a signal fire. Come to me. If my hounds must pull you down, they may not be gentle. They are jealous of what you will be once you've knelt at my feet. It is your destiny. You belong to me." Rand's mouth was dry as he told Baalzamon, "I belong to myself. Not you, not ever. Myself. If your dark friends kill me, you'll never have me." Baalzamon's eyes flared as he told Rand that alive or dead, he will belong to him. It would be easier if Rand was dead, but it would be better for Rand if he was alive. The living have more power. Gode made a strangling noise. His tongue was a burnt stump. But Alzamon called him his hound and would receive his reward. The man's body began to crumble into dust, and at first he had a look of joy, which quickly morphed into horror, realizing it was not what he'd expected. But Alzamon turned back to Rand and told him, "You are mine, alive or dead. The eye of the world will never serve you. I mark you as mine." His fist opened and a ball of flame shot out, hitting Rand in the face, exploding and searing. Rand lurched awake in the rain. His face felt tender, like he'd had a sunburn, but he couldn't find anything wrong with it. Matt was muttering and twisting in his sleep, so Rand shook him awake. Matt cried, but Alzamon took his eyes, and Rand cradled his whimpering friend, telling him that he's all right and he can't hurt them. Yet Alzamon's words ran through his head, and he wondered if he was going mad. The boys were unable to sleep again, and left their shelter at dawn as the rain eased off into a drizzle. By midday they reached the next village, but didn't stop. An hour later they came upon a farmer who gave them a lift in his cart, Alpert Mull, who was happy for company and someone to talk with. He told them to keep their stories to themselves. It would protect him and his family if he didn't know anything. He'd offer them a bed, but these are hard times to help strangers. He gave them his son's scarves, and Rand thanked him, telling him he was a good man, and promised to deny ever meeting him. They walked until they reached the next village at nightfall, but Rand felt it was too risky to perform. The innkeeper insisted they pay up front, and they dug into their emergency fund of coin to cover it. They desperately needed a real bed, not a hedgerow. They ate well and retired early, but Rand slept with his sword still belted on. They woke at dawn to a rooster crowing after a dreamless sleep. Matt exclaimed his sight was improving, but Rand's face was still a blur to him. They were in a better mood today. They were a day closer to Camelin, and hopefully reuniting with Moraine and the others. As they sat for breakfast, a village youth entered the common room. His eyes lit up at seeing the boys and asked if he could sit with them. Rand wondered if he hoped to share their meal, despite looking like he could pay for his own. He introduced himself as Pater, and told them this wasn't his idea and he doesn't want to do this. Matt growled, "Dark friend." Pater glanced around in a panic at being overheard. He was sweating but didn't deny it. The common room was empty except for an old man sweeping on the other side who clearly hadn't heard. Rand shook his head slowly. He'd known that dark friends didn't have the dragon's fang on their foreheads, but Pater caught him off guard. He wouldn't look out of place back home. He told Pater to leave them alone and tell his friends the same, while Matt threatened to expose him. Pale-faced, Pater told them he'd heard about Four Kings, and he's alone. He only wants to talk with them. Rand worried that the dark friends would learn that Matt was practically blind, which would put them in a weakened position. The boys got up to leave and told Pater to go away, leave them alone. But as they reached the inn door, he called for them to wait and listen. Images of Shadowspawn filled Rand's head until he spun and punched Pater full in the face. The dark friend fell to the ground, blood dripping down his nose. Angrily he spat, "You won't get away! No matter how strong you are, the great lord of the dark is stronger. The shadow will consume you." The old man gasped and dropped his broom, clearly hearing this time, and stared at Pater in shock. Pater cursed and fled from the inn, and as the old man turned to look at them, the boys left quickly after. Matt growled, "Blood and ashes! They're always there, always right on our heels. We'll never get away." Rand explained that if Alzamon truly knew where they were, why send Pater? No, it would have been another goad with 30 enforcers. No one will know where they are until Pater tells the others, and they will not lie down and let them take them. That day they got 6 short rides with farmers, some with stories of that morning's events. One told them of a crazy old man in Market Sharon, claiming they were dark friends. He thought it was hysterical and the best story he'd heard in years. Another farmer claimed to have actually seen a meeting of 20 dark friends in the village, and if the Queen won't sort it out, then maybe the Children of the Light should be brought in. The next village appeared at sunset, and Rand decided to chance playing again. They entered the inn, the Queen's Man, and found it full. Rand played a song for the innkeeper, and they were offered a bed to share. Rand was feeling queasy and suddenly dropped his head in his hands, shivering all over. He could barely understand what Matt was saying to him as he was led from the inn. Rand tried to apologise to Matt, but couldn't get a word out as his teeth kept chattering. Matt told him it was all right, it was his turn to care for Rand. The innkeeper was letting him use the stable. He was worried about having sickness in his inn, and Matt had threatened to announce it if he didn't help. Matt set him down in the straw and told him he had a fever. He left briefly, returning with water and a plate of food that turned Rand's stomach. Matt announced that the version of a wisdom in this town, Mother Brune, was busy with a birth, and the innkeeper master-in-law will give them whatever they need as long as Rand stays away. Rand was racked with fever chills and complained of thirst. He became delirious, imagining the stable shadows were Baalzaman or a murderer, and panicked, despite Mat's reassurance. He was also plagued with visions of people he knew or loved throughout the night. Egwene accused him of abandoning her. Moraine told him to get to Tar Valon. Only the Aes Sedai can save him. Tom told him that trusting Aes Sedai would make him wish he was dead. Which Azure will get him, red or black? Lan warned that he had to be worthy of the Heron-marked blade. And many others. Perrin, Min, Marinalvia, Bael Dumman, Master Fitch. The worst was Tam, who simply shook his head sadly at him, while Rand begged to be told who he really was. When he started to feel more lucid, he found Mat trying to get him to drink, and announced that the fever was broken. He drifted into a dreamless sleep, but woke to the screech of the door hinge, and saw that Mat was asleep with his scarf over his face. A woman in a green silk dress entered, and Rand called out to wake Mat. When Mat challenged her, she claimed to be checking on her horse, and asked if Rand was ill. Mat told her he only had a chill from the rain, and she offered to check on him, making Rand wonder if she was an Aes Sedai, based on her clothing being so like Moraine's. She knelt next to him, murmuring about him not having a fever, and how he's weak as a kitten. She drew a dagger from her cloak and lunged at Mat, who toppled sideways. The sound of metal hitting wood revealed she'd missed, and Mat gripped her wrist while holding his ruby dagger to her throat. Rand saw the wood the dagger hit smoking as it turned black, and he pointed it out to Mat, who disarmed her. Mat warned her not to move or he'd kill her as he handed the dagger over to Rand. Rand saw that Mat was struggling with the urge to kill her and shouted at him not to. Mat snarled that she's a dark friend. She tried to kill him and probably would have killed Rand too. Gently, Rand reminded him that they aren't like them. She told him there's been a mistake. There's been confusion since what happened with that egotistical fool, Goad. Not to mention the idiot that set off the trouble in Market Sharon. They will have honoured places if they serve the Great Lord of the Dark of their own free will, but as long as they run, they'll be pursued. Mat scoffed the Dark Friends aren't as powerful as he'd heard if they're having problems with two farm boys. She taunted them as she announced that a murderer was on its way. She'd contacted it before entering the stable. They had to leave immediately, so Mat locked her in a tack room, helped Rand to his feet and grabbed their gear. Before leaving, Mat threw her dagger into a pail of water which hissed. It was already morning when they left the village, Rand walking as fast as his wobbly legs would allow. A mile down the road, Rand's legs gave way and he collapsed. Mat dragged him to the side of the road and insisted they had to keep going. Someone will let the Dark Friends out soon and they'll be after them. A farmer approached in his cart and to their luck he paused to offer them a ride. He asked if Rand was sick, but Mat told him he's only exhausted. Rand managed to reach the cart and told the man that he hadn't slept for 2 days after food poisoning. The farmer asked if they were going to Camelin to see the false dragon, like many are doing. Mat latched onto that explanation and told him yes. The man told Rand to get onto the straw in case he was sick, then introduced himself as Hyam Kinch.
Thanks for listening. Please like, share and subscribe and help get a new channel off the ground. Thank you.